The livestock auction in rural Missouri was the kind of place where dust hung in the air like a fog, and the smell of hay, sweat, and worn leather clung to everything. Most people came to bid on cows or pigs, some even on chickens, but no one cared much about dogs, especially not a thin, trembling German shepherd standing alone in a corner kennel, his fur matted, ribs jutting sharply under his skin. A faded tag on his collar read Atlas Failed Service Dog. The words made Emily's stomach twist. Something about them felt wrong, almost cruel. Emily Carter, a 10-year-old with a shock of untamed brown hair and eyes that always seemed too large for her face, tugged at her father's sleeve. "Dad, can we look at him?" she whispered. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic, as if she were asking permission to break the rules of the world. Her father, a burly man with calloused hands and a constant frown that came from years of trying to keep life simple, glanced down at her, then at the dog. "Emily, no," he said firmly but without much conviction. "That dog, he's sick. He's not for sale for kids like you. He's—" Emily didn't hear the rest. She was already stepping closer to the kennel. The auctioneer's voice rose, commanding attention over the clamor of bidders shouting for livestock. $50, $40, $30. Most of the crowd ignored the dog, passing him by like he was a broken toy no one wanted. But Emily's small hand clenched around her pink wallet. Inside, her last birthday money, a handful of crumpled bills, waited. She had saved it for months, imagining all the fun things she could buy. A doll, a set of paints, maybe a trip to the ice cream shop downtown. But none of that mattered now. Her gaze met Atlas's, and something unspoken passed between them. His eyes were sharp, alert, intelligent, and for a moment Emily could see past the frailty of his body. She could see the dog he had once been. A dog who had been trained, who had served, who had loved and worked and given his all, and had been discarded like trash. The idea made Emily's chest tighten with a mix of anger and sorrow. "Dad," she whispered again, louder this time, can we get him?" Her father's eyes narrowed, his voice low but firm. "Emily, he's not safe. He's sick. We don't know what's wrong with him. You can't just—" The auctioneer pounded his gavel, cutting off all other noise. "Going once, going twice, sold." Emily froze. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She hadn't even realized she had raised her hand, signaling a bid. She had acted before thinking, before logic, before fear. She had offered $30, all of her money. And now she had just bought Atlas. The handler, a middle-aged man with a face tanned by years of sun and wind, shuffled over, holding a worn leather leash. "You're sure about this, little lady?" he asked, eyeing her suspiciously. "This dog's delicate." Emily nodded, her jaw set, hands trembling. She reached through the bars of the kennel, her fingers brushing Atlas's fur. He flinched but didn't pull away. His eyes locked onto hers, unblinking, heavy with years of training and disappointment, yet full of something like hope. The room was silent for a heartbeat, the murmurs of the crowd dying down. Some shook their heads, muttering about foolish children and sick animals. One man laughed quietly, a sharp, bitter sound. "Kid, buying herself a corpse," he said. Atlas's body trembled violently, and for a moment Emily feared she had made a terrible mistake. He stumbled forward on weak legs, his head dipping low. Her father's face went pale. "Emily, step back," he hissed, but she couldn't. She couldn't let go. With a soft, trembling voice, she whispered, "It's okay, I've got you now." The dog tilted his head, sniffing at her hand, then suddenly dropped to the ground, unable to support himself. A hush fell over the room. The auctioneer's gavel clicked awkwardly against the podium as people looked on, unsure how to react. The handler crouched down, lifting Atlas carefully, and placed him into Emily's small arms. He felt lighter than she expected, fragile like a bird, yet his gaze never left hers. On the ride home, Atlas sat in the backseat, wrapped in a thin blanket. Emily talked to him softly the whole way, telling him about her school, her cat at home, about her mother who had passed 2 years ago. She spoke of all the little things that mattered in her life, hoping somehow that her voice would reassure him, that he would understand she was on his side now. Her father kept stealing glances at the rearview mirror, worry etched deep into his forehead. "Emily," he finally said, voice heavy, "what if he's really sick? What if he doesn't make it?" Emily's hands tightened around Atlas's blanket. Then I'll make sure he gets better. I won't let anyone hurt him again. I promise." The sun was setting, casting a golden glow through the car windows. Dust particles floated in the beams of light, making the scene look almost magical. Atlas, despite his weakness, lifted his head and met Emily's gaze. For the first time, a soft whine escaped his throat, a sound not of pain but of recognition. It was as if he was saying, "I see you, and maybe, just maybe, we'll survive this together." That night when they arrived home, Emily laid Atlas carefully in a laundry basket lined with old blankets. He tried to stand, but his legs buckled, sending him into the soft fabric with a small thump. Emily's father knelt beside him, examining the dog. "This is going to be hard," he murmured. Emily stroked Atlas's fur, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "I know," she whispered, "but he's mine now, and I'll do everything I can." As Atlas closed his eyes, exhausted from the day's events, a soft shiver ran through his body. Emily hugged him tightly, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders, heavy and frightening. Yet beneath that fear, a spark of something powerful glimmered, a bond forming between a child and a dog, one that no illness, no doubt, and no obstacle could break. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the smell of damp earth and the distant echo of the auctioneer's gavel. Emily felt a shiver of anticipation, not knowing what tomorrow would bring. She had saved a dog nobody else wanted, but at what cost? And more importantly, could she save him in time? Somewhere deep inside Atlas, a memory stirred, of commands shouted in a language only he and his former handler understood, of runs through crowded streets and obedience drills under bright, harsh lights. The memory brought a flicker of purpose to his weary eyes. He may have been discarded, labeled as broken. But Emily didn't know it yet, and neither did anyone else, that this little girl had just bought herself a miracle, a companion who still carried the skills, instincts, and heart of a true service dog. As Emily drifted off to sleep on the floor beside him, Atlas let out a small, almost imperceptible sigh. Outside, the night was quiet, but inside that little room, a story had already begun, a story of hope, courage, and the kind of bond that changes lives forever. The camera of fate, so to speak, had focused on a small, determined girl and a dog who refused to be forgotten. And as the moonlight fell across their faces, neither of them knew the trials awaiting them. What seemed like a simple rescue was about to become a journey that would test love, courage, and the limits of human and canine endurance. At the edge of the room, the faint sound of a knock went unheard, a signal that someone somewhere was about to enter their lives, and nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning, the sun rose pale and hesitant over Emily Carter's small Missouri home. Dust motes danced in the thin shafts of light that filtered through the curtains. Atlas lay curled up on the floor, muscles trembling under a thin layer of blanket, his sharp eyes half open, still scanning the room as if wary of threats invisible to everyone else. Emily tiptoed across the room, her tiny hand brushing his fur. "Good morning, Atlas," she whispered, her voice cracking with sleep and excitement. "We're going to fix you today." Her father, Mark Carter, sat at the kitchen table, hunched over a steaming mug of coffee, his fingers drumming nervously against the ceramic. He had spent the night tossing and turning, staring at the ceiling, haunted by a mixture of fear and regret. How had a 10-year-old convinced herself that she could buy a dog at an auction, a dog who could barely stand? "Emily," he said carefully, his voice low, "we need to think about this. I mean, what if he's sicker than we know? What if this," he gestured toward Atlas, who had just stirred slightly, "is more than you can handle?" Emily shook her head firmly, her curls bouncing. "No, Dad, I have to do this. Look at him. He's scared, he's alone, and he needs me." Her eyes were wide, brimming with tears she refused to let fall. "I don't care about the money. I saved it for this, please." Mark exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. He wanted to argue, wanted to stop her from taking on a responsibility far beyond her age. But as he looked down at his daughter's determined face, he saw something he hadn't seen in years: pure, unyielding courage. There was no talking her out of it. Reluctantly, he nodded. "All right, we'll take him to the vet first thing. But Emily, you have to understand this could get expensive, and it could get complicated." Emily's lips curled into a small smile, and she crouched down to wrap Atlas in her arms. "Complicated's okay. I'm ready." The veterinary clinic smelled of antiseptic and anticipation. Emily held Atlas tightly as Dr. Helena Wright, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes but an unmistakable clinical seriousness, examined him. She ran her hands over his ribs, palpated his joints, checked his eyes, and listened to his chest. Atlas remained still, except for occasional shivers that ran through his body like electricity. Dr. Wright muttered, frowning. She pulled out a series of X-rays and spread them across the table. Emily leaned forward, her small nose almost brushing the films. What is it?" she asked softly. Dr. Wright exhaled, her brow furrowed. "Emily, this dog has been through a lot. He's thin, malnourished, and has several untreated infections. His joints are damaged, likely from overwork, and I'm seeing signs of prolonged stress. Someone pushed him past his limits." Emily's small hands tightened on the leash. "Someone abandoned him?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Dr. Wright's gaze softened, but her expression remained serious. "Yes. He was considered medically unsuitable for service work and someone just discarded him. But there's hope. With proper care, surgery, medication, and lots of patience, he could recover." Emily's father leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "And the cost?" he asked cautiously, though the answer didn't surprise him. Dr. Wright hesitated. "It will be significant. There will be multiple vet visits, treatment for infections, possible orthopedic surgery, and months of physical therapy. And even then, there's no guarantee he'll be able to serve as a service dog again." Emily didn't flinch. Her voice, small but unwavering, filled the room. "Then we'll make sure he's healthy anyway. I don't care if he works or not. I just want him to live." Dr. Wright looked at her, studying the girl for a long moment. "You understand what you're committing to?" Emily nodded, her curls bouncing slightly. "Yes, I understand." The drive home from the clinic was quiet except for the soft whimpers of Atlas as he tried to find a comfortable position in the car. Emily kept her hand pressed gently against his flank, murmuring encouragements. "You're going to be okay," she told him. "We're going to make you strong again." Mark broke the silence. "Emily, do you know what you just did? You spent all your birthday money on a dog who might not make it. He's sick. He could die." His voice shook slightly, betraying the fear he tried to hide. Emily glanced at him, determination shining in her eyes. "Dad, what if he doesn't die? What if he gets better because I didn't give up? Don't you want to try?" Mark looked out the window, watching the trees blur past. He wanted to argue, to insist on practicality, but he couldn't. Not when he saw the fire in her eyes, the same fire he remembered seeing in his late wife, a spark of stubborn hope that refused to be extinguished. At home, Emily set up a small corner for Atlas in the living room with blankets, water, and soft toys. She fed him slowly, watching every movement. Atlas ate cautiously, his movements stiff and deliberate. When he finished, he lay down, trembling slightly but alert. Emily sat beside him, resting her head against his, whispering softly about school, about her friends, about life. She didn't notice her father standing in the doorway, arms crossed, lips pressed together. He watched them quietly, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Emily's heart was already bonded to Atlas. Would her father's heart follow? Over the next few days, the slow pace of recovery began. Atlas barely moved, but Emily spent hours sitting beside him, reading books aloud, brushing his fur, and speaking to him as if her voice could mend his broken body. There was a quiet intensity to their connection, something unspoken that neither could articulate. Emily felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. Each shiver Atlas made, each labored breath pierced her heart, but she refused to look away. One afternoon, Atlas staggered to his paws and limped to the corner, sniffing at the air. Emily held her breath. He paused, eyes locking onto hers, and for a fleeting moment the faintest tail wag brushed against the blanket. It was tiny, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A sign that he still remembered something vital. That night Emily lay on the floor beside him, whispering stories of her mother and adventures she imagined for them together. Atlas shifted closer, resting his head on her chest. It was a small act, but it made Emily's heart swell. Somehow, someway, she knew this dog and she were connected for life. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the smell of wet earth and the distant hum of traffic. Emily felt a shiver of anticipation run down her spine. She didn't know it yet, but their story was just beginning. A story that would test her courage, her heart, and her understanding of love in ways no 10-year-old should ever face. And somewhere, far away, the shadow of Atlas's past lingered. Someone somewhere had lost him. And when they realized he had been found, the consequences could shake their world and Emily's in ways she would never forget. As she drifted off to sleep that night, her fingers still resting on Atlas's flank, a small thought whispered in her mind. This dog wasn't just sick, he was waiting for me. And now nothing will ever be the same. The room grew quiet. The only sound was the soft, rhythmic breathing of Atlas, but behind his amber eyes there was a spark, a memory of commands, of duty, of service. It was buried deep beneath his frailty, but it was there. And soon it would wake. Emily didn't know it yet, but tomorrow their lives would collide with the past in a way that would shock them both, and perhaps everyone around them. The question was, would they survive it? The fluorescent lights of Dr. Helena Wright's veterinary clinic buzzed faintly, illuminating the small examination room in harsh white. The smell of antiseptic was strong, cutting through the faint musk of Atlas's fur. Emily sat stiffly on the edge of the plastic chair, Atlas lying across her lap like fragile glass. His paws trembled, and every breath seemed like a battle. Dr. Wright adjusted her glasses and studied him closely, running her hands over his ribs, flexing his joints, and checking the pads of his feet. Her expression was calm, professional, but Emily could see the tension behind her eyes. Atlas flinched under her touch, but he didn't cry out. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, followed every movement, assessing each person in the room with an almost human calculation. Finally, Dr. Wright sighed, removing her gloves and leaning against the counter. "Emily, your dog isn't just sick," she said softly. "He's been discarded, and I mean that in the harshest sense. Someone pushed him past his limits and then threw him away like he was nothing." Emily felt a tight knot form in her chest. She gripped Atlas's fur harder, whispering, "I'll take care of you, I promise." Dr. Wright nodded, but her gaze drifted to the X-rays displayed on the light box. Emily leaned forward, her small frame tense with anticipation. The films were a stark testament to Atlas's suffering. His spine showed early signs of arthritis, his joints were damaged, and several bones were slightly misaligned. There were clear signs of untreated infections. One of his lungs had a shadow that suggested pneumonia in its early stages. This is serious," Dr. Wright said, her voice careful. "Atlas will need immediate treatment for infections, possibly surgery for his joints and months of physical therapy. And even then," she paused, her gaze dropping, "there's no guarantee he'll be able to function as a service dog again." Emily's throat tightened, but she refused to let her tears fall. "I don't care if he works again," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just want him to be healthy. I just want him to live." Dr. Wright's expression softened, but the room remained heavy with tension. "It's going to be expensive, Emily, and it's going to be hard, very hard. Are you sure you're ready for this?" Emily nodded, her curls bouncing slightly. Yes, I've saved my birthday money for months. I don't care about toys or games. I care about him. I have to do this. Mark Carter, Emily's father, rubbed the back of his neck and exhaled slowly. He looked at his daughter, so small, so fragile, yet unshakably determined. He felt a mixture of awe and fear. Emily, this could go wrong. He could get worse. You need to understand that. Emily's eyes, wide and unwavering, locked onto his. Then we'll fight harder. We'll do whatever it takes. Over the next few hours, Dr. Wright began a series of treatments. Atlas was given intravenous fluids to rehydrate him, antibiotics to combat his infections, and pain medication to ease the joint inflammation. Emily sat by his side, holding his paw in hers, whispering stories about her mother, about school, and about imaginary adventures they would take together. Every so often, Atlas would lift his head, meeting her gaze as if understanding every word. As the treatments progressed, Dr. Wright gently examined his joints. You know, she said, glancing at Emily, this dog was trained for something extraordinary. His posture, his muscle memory, the way he reacts to stimuli, he wasn't just any service dog. He was one of the best. And someone abandoned him when he got sick. That's criminal. Emily felt a shiver run through her body. Abandoned, she asked, her voice catching. He was thrown away. Dr. Wright's gaze softened. Yes. Someone decided he wasn't useful anymore, but you gave him a second chance. Emily hugged Atlas closer. I promised him I won't let him down. Days turned into weeks. Atlas's condition slowly improved, though each improvement was hard one. He began to eat without hesitation, his strength returning in small increments. Emily spent every free moment by his side, brushing his fur, guiding him through gentle exercises and whispering encouragements. The bond between them grew stronger, more profound. Emily's father watched in quiet awe as she patiently cared for Atlas, her small hands capable of coaxing movement, comfort, and courage from a dog who had been broken both physically and emotionally. One evening, while Emily was guiding Atlas through a simple walking exercise, he suddenly paused and stiffened, his ears snapping forward. Emily froze, following his gaze. Across the room, a shadow moved, a stray cat that had wandered in from the yard. Atlas didn't growl. He didn't bark. Instead, he positioned himself between Emily and the cat, his body low but protective. Emily gasped. Atlas, you remember, she whispered, her voice trembling. You remember how to protect. Atlas's tail flicked once, then he sat down, eyes locked on Emily. It was the first time in weeks he had shown a clear reaction to training instincts. Something inside him, buried beneath pain and neglect, was awakening. The next day, Dr. Wright called with news that would change everything. Emily, we found something unusual. Atlas has a microchip. We traced it back to a service dog organization. He wasn't supposed to be in an auction. Emily's brow furrowed. What do you mean? He was assigned to a veteran, Dr. Wright explained. A man named Staff Sergeant Daniel Reyes. Atlas was considered one of their top service dogs. Records show he went missing during a facility closure, and someone marked him as medically unsuitable when he was actually just recovering from minor injuries. They didn't want to deal with him anymore. That's why he ended up where he did. Emily felt a lump form in her throat. Atlas shifted, head tilting slightly as if reacting to the name, his tail flicking once. He whined softly, pressing against Emily's arm. Her father stepped closer, eyes wide. So, he belonged to someone else. Emily looked down at Atlas. The dog's amber eyes met hers, full of trust, fear, and a glimmer of hope. Does it matter? She whispered. He's here now, he's safe. I'm not letting him go. Dr. Wright hesitated. Emily, legally, he belongs to the organization, and eventually he might have to be returned to his handler. Emily felt a wave of panic. She squeezed Atlas's paw tightly. No, she whispered. He's mine, I found him, I saved him, and I won't lose him again. Dr. Wright sighed, sensing the intensity of the bond forming between child and dog. Emily, you don't know what's coming. This won't be easy. The past has a way of catching up, and when it does, you and Atlas will face choices that will test you both in ways you can't imagine." Emily's heart pounded. She had already fought to save Atlas from the auction, from neglect, from sickness. And now, someone from his past might come for him. She pressed her forehead against his soft fur, whispering, "We'll face it together. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." Atlas tilted his head, letting out a low whine, almost as if he understood. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay on the floor beside Atlas, her arm draped over him as he rested his head on her chest. Shadows of the moon danced across the walls. Somewhere in the world, Atlas's former handler, Daniel Reyes, was probably wondering where his dog had gone. Emily's mind raced. Who would come first? Would they understand the bond she had formed? Or would they take him away before she could fight for him? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door, a sound so faint that even Atlas lifted his ears in alert. Emily froze, holding her breath. The knock came again, more deliberate, more insistent. She whispered to Atlas, "Stay here, I'll see." Her small hands trembled as she reached for the doorknob. Who could it be at this hour? Neighbors, a stranger, or someone from Atlas's past? The knock echoed through the silent house. Emily's chest tightened. Whatever was waiting outside would change everything. And Atlas, despite all his weakness, stood slowly, ears forward, eyes glinting with awareness. His past was coming for him. The following week settled into a rhythm of quiet intensity. Emily's small bedroom had become a makeshift recovery zone for Atlas. Blankets lined the floor, food and water bowls were carefully arranged, and soft toys were scattered around like tiny sentinels. Sunlight spilled through the curtains each morning, illuminating dust particles that shimmered like tiny stars in the air. Emily woke before dawn every day, carrying Atlas carefully to the living room to stretch his legs, brushing his matted fur, whispering to him stories she made up as she went. Atlas responded in small, careful ways. At first, he barely lifted his head when Emily entered the room. Then he would lift his nose, sniffing her hair. Finally, he began to stand, wobbly but determined, when she guided him through gentle exercises. His amber eyes, once dulled by neglect, began to flicker with the spark of recognition. One evening, Emily was leading Atlas through a simple walking drill in the hallway. "Step up," she said softly, placing her small hand on his flank. "Step up. You can do it." Atlas hesitated. His front paw lifted, then faltered. His body shook. Emily's heart clenched. "Come on, boy, you've done this before, you remember." For a moment he froze, his eyes locked on hers. Then, as if remembering something long buried, his muscles tightened and he lifted each paw with deliberate precision. Emily gasped and clapped softly. That's it, Atlas." Mark, who had been standing quietly in the doorway, arms crossed, could hardly believe what he was seeing. "Emily, he's remembering," he whispered. "He's not just a sick dog, he's still trained." Emily nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I knew it," she said. "I knew he could do it." That night, Emily lay on the floor beside Atlas. She had pulled a blanket over him, his head resting on her chest as she gently stroked his ears. "I know you're scared," she whispered. "I know it hurts, but I'm here. I won't leave you, ever." Atlas let out a soft sigh, his eyes half closed but alert. Emily traced a hand along his scarred flank, feeling the faint ridges of muscles that had once been honed for service. Somewhere deep inside him, a memory stirred, a memory of training, of obedience, of purpose. The next morning, Emily decided to test Atlas's instincts in a more practical way. She set up a small course in the backyard, using sticks, cones, and low hurdles. "Just like old times," she said softly. "You remember, Atlas, you know how to do this." Atlas's ears perked. For a moment he hesitated. Then, with a deliberate, careful energy, he began moving through the obstacles. His gait was awkward at first, but his precision was unmistakable. Emily clapped her hands and cheered. "Yes, that's it, you've got it." Mark stepped outside, leaning against the fence, astonished. Emily, he's incredible. He's doing it, after everything. Emily smiled, brushing a curl from her forehead. He's not just a dog, she whispered. He's Atlas, and he's amazing. One afternoon, as Emily guided Atlas along the path to the mailbox, a sudden misstep changed everything. Emily tripped over a loose brick, tumbling to the ground with a sharp cry. Pain shot through her wrist and ankle, and she lay on the grass, breathless and scared. Before her father could react, Atlas sprang into action. He lunged forward, placing his body between Emily and the hard ground. His front paws braced against her shoulders as he nudged her upright, steadying her with practiced precision. Mark froze in shock. "Atlas, you," he began, but his words caught in his throat. Atlas looked up at Emily, tail wagging slightly for the first time in weeks. He had saved her, not instinctively, not randomly. He had remembered. Every command, every drill, every protective action that had once been routine in his life as a service dog now surged back in a perfect, unbroken stream. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She touched his fur, feeling her heart swell. You saved me," she whispered. You remembered me." Atlas pressed his head against her chest, his eyes closing briefly. Emily could feel the bond solidifying between them, stronger and deeper than anything she had ever experienced. This was no longer just recovery. It was a partnership, a connection forged in pain, trust, and shared courage. As days passed, Atlas grew stronger. His joints loosened, his ribs filled out, and the dull glimmer in his eyes sharpened into a keen, intelligent focus. Emily's father, once skeptical and worried, began to relax, though a part of him remained cautious. "He's remarkable," Mark admitted one evening as he watched Atlas guide Emily through a series of commands she had learned from online tutorials and the vet. "But remember, he has a past, and that past, it's coming." Emily frowned. "Past, what do you mean?" Mark shook his head. "There's a reason he was at the auction. Someone let him go for a reason, and I have a feeling that reason isn't finished with him." Emily's stomach tightened. She glanced at Atlas. The dog had stopped mid-step, head cocked slightly, ears forward as if he had heard something she hadn't. Her pulse quickened. A sudden knock at the door made them both freeze. It was deliberate, almost formal. Atlas's body stiffened, muscles taut, tail flicking nervously. He let out a low, protective growl, his gaze fixed on the door. Emily's hand instinctively gripped the leash tighter. Mark stepped forward cautiously. "Who could that be?" he muttered. Emily's mind raced. A neighbor, someone from the auction, or could it be someone connected to Atlas's past? The thought made her heart pound in her chest. She crouched down beside Atlas, whispering, "Whatever it is, we face it together." The knock came again, louder this time, echoing through the small house. Atlas moved closer to Emily, his body shielding her, ready to act at a moment's notice. His eyes, once dulled by sickness and neglect, now shone with purpose and awareness. Emily held her breath, her fingers trembling on the leash. This was more than fear. This was anticipation. The shadow of Atlas's past had arrived, and whatever, or whoever, it was, it had come for him. She whispered again, more firmly this time, "We've come too far to let go now. We're not letting go." Atlas responded with a small, resolute whine, pressing his head into her hands. His muscles tensed as if acknowledging the challenge ahead. Emily knew, in that instant, that nothing would ever be the same. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. The late afternoon sun cast long, jagged shadows across the walls. Emily could feel the weight of what was coming. The past was no longer distant. It had arrived. And whatever happened next, the bond between girl and dog would be tested in ways they could not yet imagine. And in that moment, Emily realized something she hadn't fully understood before. Atlas wasn't just a sick dog she had saved. He was a hero, a protector, a partner. And together, they were about to face a storm that would push them both to their limits, physically, emotionally, and morally. The door creaked. Emily froze, Atlas stiffened. Somewhere on the other side, Someone from Atlas's past waited, and whatever intentions they carried would change everything. The next morning dawned gray and restless. Rain drizzled along the streets of Emily's neighborhood, leaving slick, reflective puddles that mirrored the somber sky. Emily, still in her pajamas, sat cross-legged on the living room floor, Atlas curled beside her like a living pillow. The storm outside made the world feel smaller, enclosed, and yet tense, as if something was pressing against the edges of their little sanctuary. A sudden knock at the front door broke the silence. Emily froze, glancing at Atlas. His ears perked instantly, body rigid. He had learned to sense changes, to read the smallest cues, and he didn't like this. "Stay," she whispered, her hand brushing his fur. Atlas pressed his body closer to hers but didn't move. Mark Carter got up from the kitchen table, dripping wet from the rain, and opened the door. A courier handed him a thick, official-looking envelope. The stamp read, "Priority Mail, Sensitive Information." Mark frowned, glanced at Emily, and carefully carried it inside. "Emily, I don't know what this is," he said, placing the envelope on the coffee table. "It looks serious." Emily's curiosity flared. She tore open the envelope carefully, and inside was a crisp letter on letterhead from the National Service Dog Organization. Her hands trembled slightly as she read aloud. "Dear Emily Carter, we have been tracking Service Dog #A9273, registered under the name Atlas. It has come to our attention that Atlas was found in unauthorized custody and sold at a public auction. Atlas was previously assigned to Staff Sergeant Daniel Reyes, a veteran with multiple service requirements. We request that you contact our office immediately to discuss his status and potential return to his handler. Regards, National Service Dog Organization." Emily's voice faltered. "Dad, they want Atlas back." Her fingers lingered over the paper, her mind racing. Atlas, who had become her companion, her protector, her friend, could be taken away. Mark's jaw tightened. "Emily, I knew this was coming. That's why I said his past would catch up to him, but I didn't think it would be so soon." Atlas stirred beside Emily, his head lifting, ears alert. When Emily said the name Daniel Reyes, his body tensed. He stood, muscles coiled, tail flicking nervously, and pressed his head against Emily's hand. It was subtle, but the recognition was unmistakable. He remembered. Emily's heart ached. He knows," she whispered. "He knows his old handler." Mark sighed heavily. "Emily, this is bigger than just a sick dog at an auction. He's been trained to assist a veteran. If the organization insists, they have a right to reclaim him." Emily's stomach churned. The thought of losing Atlas after everything they had endured together, the recovery, the bonding, the late-night talks, the gentle walks, the moments where he saved her even when he was weak, felt unbearable. She looked down at his amber eyes shining in the dim light of the living room. "Dad, I can't let him go," she said quietly, almost to herself. "He's my dog now. He chose me. I chose him. We belong together." Atlas whined softly and nudged her hand, as if agreeing. The following days were a whirlwind of tension and uncertainty. The organization called repeatedly, each time leaving messages that were polite but firm. "Emily, we understand the bond you have with Atlas," one voice said over the phone. "But please remember he is legally assigned to a veteran with critical needs. We need to discuss his return." Emily refused to hang up. She spent hours talking to the operator, explaining how sick he had been, how she had nursed him back to life, how he had grown attached to her. "He trusts me," Emily said, her voice cracking. "He needs me." Mark sat beside her one evening, rubbing her back gently. "Emily, I admire your heart more than anything, but the law, it's complicated. And Atlas's past, it's more complicated than we realized." Emily's mind raced. Could she fight this? Could a 10-year-old stand against an organization, against the law, to protect a dog who had already survived so much? She felt small, helpless, and determined all at once. Then, one rainy afternoon, a car pulled up in front of their house. Mark peeked out the window and saw a tall man in uniform stepping out. His posture was straight, his expression unreadable, but his eyes dark, intense, held a depth of grief and fatigue that immediately drew Emily's attention. Emily froze. Atlas perked up instantly, ears forward, muscles tense. He lunged slightly toward the window before stopping, his gaze fixed on the man. Emily's breath caught. She didn't need to ask who it was. She had seen his name in the letter, Daniel Reyes. The man stepped onto the porch, rainwater dripping from his coat, and spoke firmly but softly. "I'm Daniel Reyes. Is Atlas here?" Emily swallowed hard. "Why, yes," she said, her voice small. Atlas stayed by her side, but his body quivered in anticipation. Daniel's eyes scanned the house and then locked onto the dog. For a moment the world seemed to stop. Atlas, weak yet alert, lifted his head and whined softly. Then, to everyone's astonishment, he walked deliberately toward Daniel. Emily's heart raced. The bond she had formed with Atlas was undeniable, but so was the connection he shared with his former handler. Daniel knelt slowly, extending a hand. "Atlas," he whispered. Atlas froze, then pressed his head against Daniel's hand. His tail twitched once. Emily watched, tears blurring her vision. She realized in that instant that Atlas's past was not something she could erase. His loyalty, his instincts, his training, they were still part of him. "Emily, this is," Daniel's voice faltered. He looked at the girl, then at the dog, then back at the girl. I don't know how to explain this, but you've cared for him. You've brought him back to life. And he stopped, clearly overwhelmed. Atlas let out a low whine, pressing his body between Emily and Daniel, as if signaling a choice he couldn't yet articulate. Emily's mind raced. Was Atlas torn? Could he belong to both? Or would she have to make the hardest decision of her life? Dr. Wright had been right. The past had arrived, and it was here in full force. Emily's fingers clenched around Atlas's fur. "You stay with me," she whispered fiercely. "We fought too hard to be separated now." Daniel's eyes softened. "Emily, I'm not here to take him by force. I need to understand. He's been through a lot, and so have I, but if he's with you, I want to make sure it's right for him." Emily looked at Atlas. He was trembling, his head low, eyes flicking between her and Daniel. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside her chest. She realized the truth. Sometimes love meant holding on, and sometimes it meant letting go. But how could she choose? Atlas lifted his head slowly and whined again. The sound pierced Emily's heart. It was a sound of uncertainty, of recognition, of a memory reaching out from the past. And then, in a moment that made Emily's heart skip, Atlas took a single step toward Daniel, then paused, looking back at her. His amber eyes seemed to plead with her, to ask her silently what she wanted, what she needed. Emily's hands shook. She whispered, almost to herself, "We'll figure it out together, but I'm not letting go without a fight." Daniel nodded slowly, understanding the silent conversation unfolding between girl and dog. He reached out, letting Atlas sniff his hand, then paused, respecting the bond he saw. "Emily, I promise," he said quietly. "Whatever happens, we'll do what's best for him." Emily exhaled, a mix of relief and dread flooding her chest. The storm outside raged harder, rain pelting against the windows. But inside, a different storm had begun, one of choices, loyalties, and a bond so strong it would test everyone involved. The past had arrived. The future was uncertain. And Atlas, caught between the two worlds, lifted his head again, ears forward, muscles tense. Emily realized something she hadn't fully understood before. Sometimes saving someone wasn't just about keeping them alive. Sometimes it was about fighting for their heart, their soul, and their freedom. And as the rain poured down, the three of them, girl, dog, and veteran, stood in the living room, silent, watching each other, aware that everything was about to change. Outside, the storm didn't let up. And inside, Emily knew one thing with terrifying clarity. The choice ahead would define all their lives, and no one, not even Atlas, could predict how it would end. The rain had eased into a soft drizzle by dawn, leaving the streets slick and shiny. Emily sat cross-legged on the living room floor, Atlas curled beside her like a protective shadow. The letter from the National Service Dog Organization had been folded neatly beside the coffee table, but it no longer seemed important. What mattered now was the man who had arrived the night before, Daniel Reyes, Atlas's former handler, a man whose presence carried authority, exhaustion, and something Emily couldn't quite name: pain. Daniel had stayed the night at a nearby motel, claiming he didn't want to overwhelm Emily or Atlas. But Mark Carter had noticed something immediately. The man hadn't slept. His dark eyes were ringed with fatigue, his movements precise yet heavy with tension. Every time Atlas stirred, Daniel flinched slightly, as if his entire body remembered every danger, every alert, every mission from their shared past. That morning, Daniel arrived at Emily's house again, this time bringing a small duffel bag. He had a quiet demeanor, but Emily noticed his hands were scarred, the knuckles worn as if they had gripped something tightly for years. He knelt beside Atlas, his voice soft yet commanding. "Hey, buddy," he whispered. Atlas stiffened, then relaxed slightly, sniffing at Daniel's hand. The tension in the room was thick, electric. Emily watched closely. "Daniel, you know him," she said quietly. "You understand him in ways I can't." Daniel nodded, his jaw tight. "I do. I've spent years with him. He saved me more times than I can count. He's more than a dog, he's a part of me." His eyes darkened, distant. "And I almost lost him." Emily tilted her head, curious but cautious. "What happened?" Daniel's hand rested lightly on Atlas's back, his eyes tracing the dog's scars. "We were deployed overseas. Atlas, he was trained to protect, to alert, to guide. One night there was an explosion near our unit. Atlas ran into danger to protect me. He saved me, but he got hurt. Minor injuries, really. But the organization, they deemed him medically unfit and discarded him." He shook his head, frustration flickering across his face. "I tried to fight for him, but I failed." Emily's hands tightened on Atlas's fur. "You failed, he's alive, and I saved him." Daniel looked at her, a mixture of gratitude and guilt in his eyes. "Yes, you saved him, you nursed him back when I couldn't, and you gave him a second chance at life. I didn't expect this." Atlas let out a low whine, nudging Emily's hand. Daniel's gaze softened. "I can see why he bonded with you, he trusts you, and I don't want to take him from you if it's going to hurt him." Emily's chest tightened. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, the day Atlas would return to Daniel, the inevitable goodbye. But hearing the man speak like this, seeing his vulnerability, was different. It made the decision more complex. "You've cared for him," Daniel continued, "and you've done more than anyone thought possible, but I need him too, not for me but for the people he serves. And I don't want to hurt him again. I don't want him to feel abandoned again." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want him to feel abandoned either. That's why I can't let him go. He's mine now too." Daniel swallowed hard. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. "Emily, I understand, and I don't want to fight you, but we need to decide what's best for Atlas. He's been through enough trauma. He deserves a life where he feels safe and loved without fear of being discarded again." Atlas lifted his head, amber eyes locking on Daniel. Emily noticed something subtle, a flicker of recognition, a memory surfacing from years of training. His tail twitched slightly, a hesitant sign of his internal struggle. Emily whispered, "He's torn. He wants to do what's right, but he also trusts me. Please, Daniel, don't make him choose alone." Daniel nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of the situation. "All right, we'll figure this out together, but Emily, I need you to understand something. Atlas's instincts, his training, they are strong. He will follow the person who gives him the structure he needs. That might be me, that might be you, or it might be both of us in a new way, but we have to be honest with him, and with ourselves." Emily's mind raced. Both of them. How could a dog belong to two people? Could a 10-year-old truly share a bond like this with a man who had been Atlas's entire world? And yet, the idea resonated. Emily looked down at Atlas. He was trembling slightly, still unsure, still fragile, but his eyes shone with trust and hope. Daniel leaned closer. "Let's start small," he suggested. "We'll go through some exercises. You handle him first, then I'll work with him. We'll see how he responds. No pressure, no rules, just observe." Emily nodded, determination flooding through her. "Okay, but Atlas, remember, I'm your family now. I've saved you, and I'll fight for you if I have to." Atlas lifted his head, letting out a soft whine, his ears forward. His amber eyes flicked between Emily and Daniel, searching, calculating, weighing loyalty and trust. For the first time in weeks, the room felt charged with possibility. The bond between girl and dog had been tested by sickness, neglect, and fear. Now it faced a new challenge. The man who had shared Atlas's entire past, the one who had trained him, saved him, and relied on him in ways Emily could never fully understand. Emily led Atlas through a series of simple commands: sit, stay, heel, step up. His movements were cautious but precise. Then Daniel called his name softly, guiding him through a similar exercise. Atlas hesitated, glancing back at Emily, then responding to Daniel. He was testing, learning, weighing his options. Emily felt a pang of fear. Would he leave her? Would Daniel reclaim him, no matter how gentle he was? She knelt beside Atlas, whispering, "You decide, but don't leave me, please." Atlas pressed his head against her shoulder, a soft whine escaping his throat. Daniel stepped back, giving the dog space. The tension in the room was palpable. No one moved for a long moment, just watching him decide. Outside, the drizzle had stopped. The sun broke through the clouds, casting thin, hopeful beams across the wet pavement. Inside, a different light was forming, a glimmer of understanding, of trust, of a bond that could survive even the most impossible choices. And then, as if sensing the weight of the moment, Atlas lifted his head, amber eyes flashing with clarity. He stepped slightly forward, not toward Daniel, not away from Emily, but into the space between them. His body was tense, ready, but calm. Emily's heart pounded. Daniel's eyes widened. The dog, fragile yet strong, had made a choice, one that no one could fully predict. And whatever it meant, one thing was certain: the storm of the past, present, and future had only just begun. The room was silent except for the soft sound of Atlas's breathing. And in that silence, Emily understood something profoundly simple, yet terrifying. Love, loyalty, and courage weren't about possession. They were about trust, and Atlas was about to teach them both a lesson they would never forget. A knock on the door startled everyone. Emily froze, Atlas stiffened, Daniel's jaw tightened. Somewhere outside, a new presence had arrived. And this time the storm was not just emotional. It was about to become dangerous. The knock came again, louder this time, resonating through the quiet house like a drumbeat. Emily's heart skipped, Atlas pressing closer to her. Daniel moved instinctively, his body coiling like a spring, trained reflexes taking over. Mark Carter stepped back, eyes wide. The living room, once a haven of recovery and tentative bonds, now felt like a battlefield. "Stay here," Emily whispered to Atlas, though she knew he wouldn't move without her. His amber eyes locked on hers, full of trust and a hint of fear. Emily's hands trembled as she walked toward the door, her small frame tense with anticipation. She opened the door cautiously, and the sight that greeted her stole her breath. A man in his 40s, tall, lean, and wearing a long, dark coat, stood on the porch. His eyes were cold, calculating, and there was a sharpness in his gaze that immediately put Emily on edge. He held a folder clutched tightly to his chest. "Are you Emily Carter?" the man asked, voice low and controlled. His tone carried authority, but also a subtle undercurrent of menace. "Yes," Emily said cautiously. Atlas growled softly behind her, his body tense. The man's lips curled slightly. "I'm Agent Collins, National Service Dog Organization. I believe you have Atlas." Emily's stomach tightened. Daniel stepped beside her, placing a protective hand on Atlas's shoulder. "Yes," he said, "we do, but he's recovering, he's safe here, and Emily has cared for him." Agent Collins's eyes flicked to Atlas, who remained pressed against Emily, muscles coiled, tail low but twitching. "I understand," he said smoothly. "But this dog is property of the organization. He was assigned to staff Sergeant Daniel Reyes for essential service duties. You are interfering with a legal assignment." Emily's voice shook, but she held firm. "He was sick. He was being thrown away. We saved him. You can't just take him." Collins raised an eyebrow. "The law doesn't care about sentiment. He is trained, valuable, and his handler requires him. This is not optional. He must return." Atlas growled, low and threatening, ears forward, muscles taut. Emily instinctively wrapped her arm around him. "He's not going anywhere," she said, her voice firmer. "Not without us. You can't take him without risking him and us." Daniel stepped forward, his gaze locking with Agent Collins. "Emily has done what I couldn't. She brought him back from near death. He trusts her. You can't just ignore that. We need to find a solution that's safe for Atlas and everyone involved." Collins's expression hardened. "Safety is relative. He is trained to serve. He is legally bound. If you refuse, you are obstructing federal property retrieval." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand. He's not property. He's alive. He's family." Atlas let out a low growl, stepping slightly forward, his body rigid. Daniel placed a calming hand on Atlas's back, but the dog's instincts were clear. He was ready to defend Emily, to protect her at all costs. Mark's voice shook. "Emily, maybe we should let them take him. They're serious. You don't understand how serious this is." Emily shook her head. "No, they don't understand. They've never cared for him when he was weak. They've never nursed him through pain. They can't take him away from me now." Collins's eyes narrowed. "This isn't a negotiation. Step aside." Daniel's jaw tightened. He glanced at Emily, who shook her head. He looked at Atlas, reading the dog's body language, sensing the deep loyalty and bond they had formed. He took a deep breath. "Agent Collins, I don't want a confrontation, but Atlas's well-being comes first. And right now, that means he stays here until we can ensure he's ready." Collins's gaze flicked between Daniel and Emily, his lips pressed into a thin line. "You are complicating a federal matter. If this escalates, consequences will follow." Atlas barked sharply, low and commanding, the sound vibrating through the air like a warning. Emily instinctively stepped closer, hugging his side. "You don't scare me," she whispered. "And you don't scare him either." The air crackled with tension. It wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was a test of will, courage, and the unspoken bond between a girl and her dog. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, adrenaline mixing with fear. Daniel moved subtly to shield Emily, his body angled defensively. Atlas's health is fragile. Any sudden stress could undo months of recovery. We are prioritizing his safety. I suggest you leave for now, Agent Collins, until we can coordinate." Collins's gaze softened slightly, not out of sympathy but calculation. "This isn't over. The organization will not forget this. And when Atlas is ready, he will return. Make no mistake." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. "And what if he doesn't want to go?" she whispered. Atlas nuzzled her hand, alert but calm, as if understanding her fear. Collins's eyes flicked to the dog. For the first time, his posture stiffened, his confidence wavering. The dog is trained to obey, but if his loyalty lies elsewhere, that could complicate matters. Emily's chest tightened. His loyalty lies with who saved him, who loves him, who stayed when everyone else ignored him. That's me. Collins exhaled, his expression unreadable. "We will monitor, and when the time comes, the choice will be made. Until then, this matter remains open." He turned sharply and left, rain slicking his coat, leaving a heavy silence behind. Emily sank to the floor, pulling Atlas close. "Did you hear that, boy? He's not going to give up. They'll try again." Atlas pressed his head against her chest, letting out a low whine, as if acknowledging her fear but also giving silent courage in return. Daniel knelt beside them, rubbing Atlas gently. "You've done something incredible, Emily. You've given him life again. But the reality is they'll come back, and we have to be ready." Mark shook his head slowly, anxiety etched into his features. "I never imagined, Emily, you've got a fighter in that dog, and a fighter in yourself. But this could get dangerous." Emily wiped her tears, but her gaze was determined, unwavering. "I don't care how dangerous. He's mine. He chose me, and I'm not letting go." Atlas lifted his head, amber eyes shining. He let out a soft bark, his body tense but steady, signaling a readiness that matched Emily's own resolve. Together they were unbreakable. Outside, the drizzle had stopped, but the storm felt far from over. The shadows of the past, the threats of the organization, and the uncertainty of Atlas's future hung heavy in the air. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she stroked Atlas's fur, whispering, "We'll face them together." Daniel stood, glancing at Emily with a mixture of respect and concern. "We need a plan, for Atlas, for you, and for all of us, because whatever comes next, it won't be gentle." Emily nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. Atlas pressed his head into her lap, a quiet reminder of why she had fought this far. She realized that love, loyalty, and courage weren't just words, they were actions, and they had no choice but to act together as a team. Somewhere beyond the streets and down the rain-slick roads, Agent Collins was already planning his next move. And Emily, Atlas, and Daniel knew that when he returned, the storm would finally hit. But for now, they had each other, and sometimes that was the only weapon you needed. Atlas let out a soft, confident whine, tail flicking. Emily smiled through her tears. "We're ready," she whispered. "Whatever comes, we're ready." The house was quiet again, but the tension lingered, thick and unyielding. Outside, the clouds were breaking, rays of sunlight slicing through the gray. Inside, a different light was forming, the light of courage, of unbreakable bonds, and of a fight that had only just begun. The knock at the door had been only the beginning. And the storm was far from over. The morning sun broke over the neighborhood in muted gold, casting long shadows across the rain-slick streets. Inside the Carter home, Emily sat cross-legged on the living room floor, Atlas lying beside her, head resting against her knee. The air was thick with anticipation. Today would decide everything, his past, his present, and their future. Daniel Ray stood by the window, arms crossed, eyes distant. His jaw was tight, a storm of emotions flickering behind his dark eyes, pride, grief, guilt, and love. Mark Carter leaned against the doorway, silent, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Everyone understood the gravity of the day. There was no turning back. Emily took a deep breath and looked down at Atlas. "It's okay, boy," she whispered softly. "Whatever you choose, we'll respect it, but I hope you stay with me." Atlas lifted his head, amber eyes locking with hers. For the first time, there was a visible decision in his gaze, a choice that no one could force, a bond that no law or regulation could break. He nudged her hand, soft but deliberate, as if signaling, "I'm ready." Daniel knelt beside Atlas, extending a hand slowly. "Buddy, it's your choice," he said quietly, voice thick. "I'm not here to force you. You've been through a lot. You've earned your say. Where do you want to be?" Atlas lifted his nose, sniffing Daniel's hand. Then he turned his head toward Emily. He pressed himself against her side, tail flicking once, a small but unmistakable gesture of loyalty and trust. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She held his fur tightly, whispering, "You're safe with me. You're home with me." Daniel exhaled slowly, a mix of relief and awe crossing his face. I understand," he said, "and I respect it. Emily, you've given him more than anyone else. You've saved him, you've fought for him, and I see that, thank you." Mark stepped closer, finally allowing a smile. "You did it, Emily. You really did it." But the moment of peace was short-lived. Just as Emily bent to stroke Atlas, the doorbell rang, sharp, insistent, echoing through the house. Everyone froze. Atlas lifted his head, ears pricked. Daniel and Mark moved toward the door cautiously. Emily whispered, "Not again, who is it?" Mark opened the door slowly, and standing there was Agent Collins, umbrella dripping water onto the porch. His expression was stern, unyielding, but there was something new in his gaze, a hint of hesitation, almost respect. "Emily Carter, Daniel Reyes, I see you have the dog." Emily stepped protectively in front of Atlas. "He's safe, and he's chosen where he wants to be." Collins's eyes flicked to Atlas. The dog's posture was clear, relaxed yet alert, calm but decisive. Emily realized something profound. Atlas's choice wasn't just about attachment. It was about trust, recovery, and love. No rule or regulation could override that. Collins exhaled, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I see that," he said quietly. "He made his choice, and I can respect that, but understand this, Atlas is highly trained and valuable. You are now responsible for his care, his training, and his health. The organization will monitor his status, and any risk to him or to his service abilities will be evaluated. But I understand loyalty, I understand trust, and it seems Atlas has made his decision." Emily's hands trembled as she stroked Atlas's fur. "Thank you," she whispered, almost to herself. Daniel nodded slowly, kneeling beside them. "You've proven your love, Emily. You've given him everything he needed when no one else would. And that's more important than any law or regulation." Atlas pressed himself against Emily again, tail wagging faintly. He nudged Daniel gently with his nose, as if acknowledging the man, recognizing his bond, but making it clear. His heart belonged with Emily now. Mark finally exhaled, relief washing over him. "Emily, you did it. You really did it. You saved him, not just from sickness but from being lost again and again." Emily smiled through tears, feeling the weight of the past weeks lift slightly. Atlas had survived betrayal, illness, and neglect, and together they had won, against odds that had seemed impossible. But the day wasn't over. Daniel rose and walked toward the kitchen table, pulling out his phone. "Emily, I want to help you. If you're going to care for him, I want to make sure you have the resources, the knowledge, and the support. Atlas deserves the best, and you've proven you're willing to give it." Emily's jaw dropped. You would do that?" Daniel nodded. "Absolutely. He saved my life countless times. He deserves a life where he's loved, protected, and trained properly. And you've earned that right. I want to help you make sure he never suffers again." Atlas let out a soft whine, tail flicking as if approving. Emily laughed softly, hugging him tightly. We can do this together, right, Atlas?" Atlas pressed his head against her shoulder, eyes closing briefly. The trust and loyalty were clear, unshakable. Emily's heart swelled. Outside, the clouds were breaking completely now, the sun casting warm golden light across the wet streets. The storm, both literal and figurative, was finally passing. But Emily knew that the lessons of the past, the hardships, and the near losses would stay with her forever. Later that afternoon, Daniel helped Emily set up a new routine for Atlas, combining the gentle care she had given him with the structured exercises he remembered from his previous training. Together, they practiced walking, commands, and protective drills, but this time with patience, understanding, and love. Atlas responded eagerly, tail wagging, muscles loose and strong. Emily realized something profound. The dog she had bought at an auction, sick and broken, had become more than a companion. He was a teacher, a protector, and a mirror of resilience. Atlas had taught her courage, patience, and the power of loyalty, and in return she had given him a second chance at life, at love, and at trust. As evening fell, Emily, Mark, Daniel, and Atlas sat on the porch, watching the sky turn pink and gold. The rain had stopped completely, leaving a fresh, clean scent in the air. Atlas lay with his head in Emily's lap, eyes half closed, tail flicking lazily. Emily stroked his fur, smiling softly. Daniel leaned against the railing. "You've done something remarkable, Emily. Not everyone could have saved him, not everyone could have earned his trust. You've given him a home he deserves." Emily glanced up at him. I didn't do it alone. Atlas, he chose me. And you helped me understand him better. We all did it together. Mark chuckled softly. Well, I guess that makes him family. And if he's family, then we'll protect him no matter what. Atlas lifted his head, ears flicking as if acknowledging the conversation. He let out a soft, satisfied sigh, eyes closing again. Emily pressed a gentle kiss to his head. You're safe now, Atlas, and you always will be. Daniel smiled faintly, watching the bond between girl and dog, a bond stronger than anything he had witnessed in his years of service. I think this is exactly where he belongs, he said quietly. Emily felt a lump in her throat. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been tears, fear, and nights where she wondered if she could handle the responsibility. But now, sitting there with Atlas in her arms, she understood. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was the willingness to fight for those you loved, no matter the odds. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the porch. Atlas yawned, stretching his legs, muscles strong and healthy once more. Emily hugged him tightly. We made it, she whispered. We really made it. And as the sky darkened into deep twilight, Emily realized something even more profound. Life would throw storms at them again. Challenges would arise. But with Atlas by her side, she was ready for anything. Because their bond had been forged in fire, in fear, and in love. And nothing, not sickness, neglect, legal threats, or past trauma, could break it. Atlas nudged her hand gently, tail flicking once more. Emily laughed softly. I guess we're unstoppable, huh, boy? He let out a low, happy bark, his amber eyes glinting in the fading light. For Emily, Atlas, and Daniel, the storm had passed. And for the first time in a long time, the world felt safe, full of possibility and golden with hope.